Welcome to A Human Perspective. On today's episode, we have Oliver Short, who is founder of SEEKR, a recruitment company that specializes in the high-tech space. Welcome to the podcast, Ollie.
Thanks, Lola. Nice to be here.
I actually met Ollie back when we worked at a recruitment consultancy together, and we had some interesting times, didn't we, Ollie?
I think we had some great times. Lola and I were part of an early leadership team of part of a rapidly growing business.
Yeah.
And Lola and I both have fairly sort of outgoing, let's say we're both quite opinionated.
Quite energetic, I would say.
We had some energetic discussions. I once had to buy Lola an ice cream as a way of apology.
Yeah, listen, food and sugar, I'm so easy.
But yeah, Lola and I worked together a few years back now, and both survived the experience and came out the other side friends.
It's a miracle. Ollie, I think it would be good to perhaps tell the audience a little bit more about your background and your specialism.
Recruiter, as Lola already mentioned, and I had caught myself saying this to a candidate the other day. I've been recruiting in London for 15 years, and I was like, no, that can't be. Where I actually started the conversation was, I've been recruiting in London for about 10, 11, 12, 13. And then I had to look at my LinkedIn profile and I was like, okay, so I've been recruiting in London for 15 years. And I've always recruited software developers just because the first ever recruitment job I got, they were like, okay, go buddy, there's a phone. You are now our Java recruitment consultant. I didn't know what a Java was, but with much enthusiasm and limited knowledge. And yeah, so here we are a little bit later. I'd like to think I know a little bit more about the sector that I recruit for these days. Have been recruiting software engineers in London across a broad range of industry sectors, but predominantly for businesses that we would describe as being tech-centric, i.e. technology is an integral part of what they do. They're either building a product or they rely very heavily on technology to give them a competitive advantage across a range of startup businesses and larger organizations.
With these companies being at the forefront, constantly trying to innovate and therefore hire the best people, what would you say some of the biggest challenges are when it comes to actually trying to hire into the tech space?
You have a limited candidate pool in the first place. The growth of the technology sector always seems to outstrip the availability of good software developers to fill all of the positions. As you said, I've been doing this a long time, and there are only 2 times that I can remember in all the time that I've been doing this that it felt like there were more candidates than jobs, and that was very briefly after the financial crash in 2008, and then very briefly again last year when the pandemic first hit and lots of smaller businesses lost access to funding, or some businesses whose business was focused on meeting in person shrunk or disappeared or collapsed altogether, unfortunately. And for a very brief window, there were enough candidates on the market for the jobs that were available. We've now gone all the way back to the other extreme of that, and everybody's recruiting flat out, and we're back to a place where there are just not enough candidates.
Yeah. When it comes to hiring manager expectations, what are some of the issues that you come across around that?
I think one of the biggest challenges is every business wants to hire somebody who already has the skills that they're looking for. And companies have this absolute sort of obsession with finding somebody who already has all of the skills that their current team have, and thinking that they're just going to plug this person in and everything's going to, work brilliantly and everybody's going to get back to business. But as we've said, we're in an industry where there's a huge skill shortage. Nobody is really spending enough time thinking about upskilling, trying to close that skills gap. And so there are never enough candidates, and nobody wants to hire junior candidates, or it's seen as a sort of sunk cost in terms of their time in the development team. The worry is, if we hire a junior, then that's going to take some of our more experienced engineers away from their day-to-day tasks. And of course, yes, that will happen to an extent, but the speed at which a new recruit can get up to speed, especially if that person is a motivated person with the right attitude, is often underestimated. And so companies are constantly trying to hire mid-level engineers, but nobody's hiring juniors. And as a result, there are never any mid-level engineers, and the cycle continues.
Very true.
Blending your experienced hires with some junior recruits and helping to build some of those experiences in-house. Yes, some hires will need to know it all already, but if you have a couple of people in the business with deep expertise, you can build around them and build a stronger, more resilient team and build some depth in your team. But it does take some time and some thought.
You'll also have to manage the candidate's expectations. What do you tend to find some of the challenges are on that side?
I think some of the biggest disconnects, especially at the moment, is what candidates perceive to be the job market versus what the job market actually looks like. And I'll
Right.
use an example to illustrate from the world that we're in now, right?
Yeah.
Is during the pandemic, everybody was working remotely,
Yeah.
and the expectation for a lot of people was that would continue indefinitely. And then there's been a lot of discussion about what that looks like, and do businesses expect you to come back to the office? And then if you can work fully remotely, can you work from anywhere, or would you still need to be in the same country, etc.? And I think the candidate expectation was that there was going to be this utopian, I can work from anywhere in the world, earning the salary like the salary I used to earn in London, but on a beach in Thailand. And obviously the dream, but obviously like that didn't materialize. And then we have now seen some of the big players like Apple say, we want people back in the office, and Google say you can work remotely, but your salary is going to be based on your location. And slowly we're all trying to figure out what the market looks like. But as it stands from where I sit at the moment is, with almost any candidate you speak to, remote working or really flexible working is like top priority.
Yeah.
And with businesses, a lot of businesses, the reality is they would like people to come in a couple of days a week. As we said, there's this big disconnect. And if you spend 5 minutes on LinkedIn, you'll see the polls going around about remote versus.
So many conversations and polls.
We're all sick to the back teeth
Yeah.
of those polls. But
Yeah.
if you see the sort of general sentiment around those, it seems strongly skewed in favor of working remotely from anywhere on a really good salary, versus the reality.
Yeah.
Businesses have to figure out what are the legal implications of somebody working in a different country, and how do we actually make this work as a team, and what do we do for social events, and all of these other bits and pieces that they have to figure out. The major challenge as a recruiter with managing candidate expectations is a balance of giving a candidate a realistic overview of what the market looks like for their skills in such a way and from such a place where the candidate trusts that your view of the market is in fact accurate. And obviously where a lot of recruiters go wrong is they try too hard to present the view of the market as that particular role they're working, rather than actually giving a realistic view of the market. You do actually often have to bring the candidate's expectations down from a sort of lofty, perhaps a little bit unrealistic place to a more realistic place. But you need to do that in a way that the candidate still trusts that actually you are giving them an accurate picture, not, trying to present a very specific view because it suits your client's ends.
So one thing that's also a big topic in the tech space at the moment is diversity.
If these are the businesses that shape our world, technology touches on everything that we do. And if you're not involving everybody in that, then it is a disaster. And so, yes, it is incredibly important. And that's something obviously you and I both agree on. I saw something the other day. It was the most heart-wrenching article. Is this Deliveroo driver had been fired. Sorry, it might have been Uber Eats if I've just bagged Deliveroo, and it might have been Uber Eats. The guy had lost his job because the app didn't recognize his face, so it wouldn't verify that he was the right person. And then he basically got kicked out of employment, got an automated message basically going, we've terminated this.
Wow.
And then obviously now they've gone back and tracked it back, and it's a facial recognition system, and turns out doesn't do very well with darker skin. Diversity, like, hello, this is the kind of things
that's really shitty testing. So you just tested yourself.
Yeah.
Literally.
Exactly.
Okay.
Worked on everyone in our team.
Exactly.
No problem here. That's a great example of why diversity of thinking is important, but also like when you look around the room and go, actually, yes, this works for everybody in the room, then you need to make sure
Yes.
that your room has a good
Diverse.
blend of people in it.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah,
it is hugely important.
yeah,
And one of the frustrations for me as a recruiter is I sit in a seat where, on one hand, I see the kind of virtue signaling. We live in a world where companies are trying to market themselves as having personality and caring
yes,
about topics like diversity,
yeah,
inclusion,
yeah,
etc.
yeah,
And so you see all of the marketing on the, let's call it the sort of front end,
yeah,
right? There's all of the
yeah,
marketing, like, look at
yeah,
us, this is, we care about all of these things. Here's a picture of our wonderfully diverse team.
yeah. The
Oh,
two people out of the 1,000 that they
yes,
have in there.
exactly. And each of those people had an individual LinkedIn post when they
Yeah.
hired them so that they could put the picture there of
Absolutely. I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit. As much as I believe in diversity, obviously it benefits me personally when companies truly believe in diversity. There's also the fact that sometimes you just don't have the numbers. You just don't have enough females applying or interested, or you just don't have enough British Black people working as software engineers. And so, just based on sheer numbers alone, the probability is lower. And we can even go further back. What happened during school? Were they encouraged to actually move into that area? Did they even know it was a possibility? Or are we telling people that sit in certain sections, oh, geography is better for you, or the humanities, etc.? That is one of the key issues. And actually, there's work to do in the background before they even start applying in order to ensure that the numbers are there. As someone that is of an ethnic minority, I do want to be given an opportunity, yes, but not just because of the color of my skin. I want to be given an opportunity because you genuinely believe I can do good work, and because you are open and receptive to someone different, and you actually appreciate that. You appreciate a different perspective, a different style of speaking, a different background, and that as actually adding to your company. You don't want to be hired for numbers, for that shiny picture. The struggle is trying to find that balance of doing it in a valiant way, so to speak, so that everyone feels valued.
I totally love what you've just said, because obviously the two key bits that you mentioned is obviously
Yeah.
like, you can't fix this overnight and just,
Yeah.
oh, we're going to hit X quota and we'll
Yeah.
hire that many women this
Yeah.
year. You
Exactly.
actually can go some way towards fixing the problem like that if you are, for example, Google, and you can offer more salary, etc., than
Yes.
anyone else, then you can actually throw money at your diversity problem and go some way to moving the needle. But actually, what happens then is you hurt every other small tech business who lose
Yes.
their best staff because Google's trying to get more women.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that you said is, nobody wants to feel that their employment is part of the marketing of the
Exactly.
business, right?
Yeah.
You're there because you have skills and you want to contribute and you want to feel that you're hired on your merits, not because you'll look good in the company brochure.
Exactly.
But for me, one of the things that I quickly realized is I was sitting in the middle. So I see businesses going on about how important it is to hire people from diverse backgrounds and that
Yeah.
they're not a cookie cutter organization. And then in tech, I see loads and loads of candidates who didn't come up through a traditional computer science degree route, desperately trying to get into this industry. But they're finding that whatever the business is saying outside the front where they've set up their stall is not what's happening where they're recruiting at the back to find people to work in that stall, because they're
Yeah.
knocking on that door and it's, oh no, sorry, we need 5 years of experience. And I became frustrated, like sitting between two groups of really engaged, motivated people who have the attitude and have that self determination and that drive to make it happen for themselves, and
Yeah.
who are a very different looking group of people than the
Yeah.
ones already in the industry. This is where diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of everything comes from. And they're all sitting there trying to get in. But there's this big disconnect.
This is where a community that you have founded really comes in handy. And honestly, the potential of this community, I think, is huge.
So we set up Deviate. You can check us out. We're d-v-8.com, deviate.com. And we've got a LinkedIn page as well. Or just find me on LinkedIn and you can find the links to both through my LinkedIn profile. This basically came from this place where, as a recruiter, every time I advertised a junior software engineering role, I would get people, all sorts apply for the job, all of the weird and wonderful citizens of the world would be knocking on my door, and I'd have to turn the vast majority of them away because they didn't fit the profile of businesses not hiring junior engineers. They
Yeah.
didn't have the 2 or 3 years worth of experience. They were trying to get experience, and that old
Yeah.
"you've got to have experience before you can get a job where you can get experience"
Yeah.
comes in.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my sort of agency recruitment days, I used to call it my pro bono work, where I would try and have calls with these people, help them with their CVs. And as a recruiter, you're not getting a fee, and you work for a business where you are targeted on earning fees, and your life is based on successful billing. You become caught up in people's stories, and once you start talking to them, then you find yourself rooting for them. Then you become frustrated because vicariously you're experiencing what they're experiencing, and now you're invested in their success and it's not happening, and it kills you.
You know that they're good people. And you know that if someone were to hire them, they do great work. They just need to find the right space to do
That's
that great
that's
work.
and that's what you said earlier about people wanting to be hired for their attributes and their
Yeah.
ability, and knowing that, like, I can contribute in this context. Just give me a
Yes.
chance. I run a couple of
Exactly.
tech meetups for more experienced developers, and I had constantly said to the junior candidates that I spoke to, I'm going to set up a meetup. I'm going to set up a little community for people just like you. As I said to you the other day when we were chatting, I talked shit for a long time. I made promises. I said things that I didn't
Promises.
deliver on. Promises were made. And I then finally just thought, if you don't do it, it's never going to happen. And I ended up finding somebody who built websites actually through one of these junior developers. I just
Amazing.
said to, oh, yeah, I'm going to build a community for people like you. I just need someone who can build the website for me because I don't know how to do that. And he's like, my girlfriend can do that for you. Here's her email address. And I was like, shit, okay. I guess I'm going to have to follow through with that.
Better do it now.
Better do it. and so, and so I did. I emailed her, and she came back and she built us the website. And here we are.
Amazing.
So we set up Deviate, and you can check us out. We're d-v-8.com, deviate.com. The premise is very simple. We're going to create, or we have already created, we've already had our first couple of meetups, and the next one's in the diary. But we're going to create a place where we'll get senior people from the industry who care about these topics. Because one thing you do realize is that people already in the industry actually also care about this, and they're also
Yeah.
frustrated about the fact that their company doesn't necessarily walk the walk. And so
Yeah.
we've got lots of individuals who feel the same way. And so they're volunteering their time to give a monthly talk to our audience of junior engineers. And the talks are obviously deliberately targeted at people who are just starting out on that journey and are not experts yet. So it's a way for them to build their skills. And then they do an extended Q&A afterwards to cover any aspects of the talk that people were unsure about. And we've created an environment where obviously no stupid questions.
Yeah.
Everybody has the space to ask all of the questions they've always wanted to ask, but were too scared to ask in another context.
So important to create a safe space.
I've had so many people sign up to give talks that I'm now doing an additional monthly workshop where, for example, I've now got an engineering manager at a business that I recruit for who's volunteered to do an hour-long session where he will run through some of the questions that he actually asks in real-world interviews with software developers, and
Wow.
then explain to the people who sign up for it what he's actually looking for with those questions and what a good answer sounds like to him, and help people sort of practice those interview skills again in a safe space. We're up and running, and it's finally happening. And after a long time of, as I said, talking shit, I've committed, and now we're going all out.
I think it's just so brilliant. The fact that everything is online is great because it means that there's access to a wider range and group of people. Okay, I'm thinking about coding. I live in this remote area. I don't really see tech businesses around me. How do I get access? How do I get inspiration? How do I get a sense of what would be expected of me? They'll actually be able to join your community to get a real sense of what the expectations would be if they were to apply or go for an interview with these types of organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you said, with it being online, anybody can jump in from
Yeah.
anywhere. The other good thing is, whilst you're building your confidence, you don't have to present yourself. You can log in and you can just sit there and listen. and absorb.
Nice.
We obviously offer the chance people can drop their question into the chat if they're feeling a little bit shy. You ping it into the chat in the group, and then I'll read their question out for them. I've been really wowed by the senior developers that we've had do talk so far, throwing their inbox open and saying, anybody from today's talk, you want to follow up, you got some questions, you want me to look at some of your code, send me an email. And I really get the warm and fuzzies.
That is so good.
Once you spend time in their company, you realize that they've got all the attributes that these businesses are after. And we're now just forcing more people to realize the same thing. Because any of these senior developers who do the talk and field some of these questions, they now become personally invested. My elevator pitch, if you
Yeah.
will, on DV8 is it's a
Yeah.
place where junior coders can build both the skills and the contacts that will get them a job in the industry. Because as recruiters, we know network is everything. But if you come into coding from your background as a pastry chef or a veterinary nurse, or
Good luck.
good luck, because your network is not helping you. So we're giving people the chance to build the beginnings of their network that is going to serve them throughout their career.
Honestly, I think this initiative is ahead of its time. And I do feel that even myself on paper, I wouldn't say I'm the best candidate, but obviously I back myself, right? So as an individual, I
I mean,
think I'm the best. I'm
you
the
always
best.
have.
Exactly.
Anybody who's worked with you for 5 minutes
Knows I am a beast, okay?
it's getting done.
But if you just make assumptions based on names, perhaps university, or they didn't do too well on their degree, or that company they worked for, that wasn't that great, you can really miss out on someone that can show you something entirely new. I think this is really going to help expand minds in an amazing way. Deviate, so D-V-8.com. Please do check it out. I will link it in this podcast as well. It was a pleasure talking.
Awesome, Lola. Thank you so much. Lovely chatting to you.